Diane Abbott, when Mr Corbyn was elected, there's just no question that a big shaper of the vote was war, was the Iraq war. People didn't want any more of that again. And yet, basically, that momentum, and it's now called some kind of that in a pressure group there, that momentum is not carried through into the Commons. There's no evidence of any cohesive or coherent view by Labour against the war.
Well, Jeremy has put out a letter, I think.
Yeah, which we've read out tonight.
Setting out his view. You'll find that most Labour Party members, 70%, are against bombing Syria, but there are a group of Labour MPs in Parliament who seem to have been persuaded by David Cameron, but they've got the weekend to talk to their constituents, their families, their friends, and we reach a final decision on Monday. But
you could argue that actually your leader hasn't done enough to try to persuade the people, the MPs in Parliament, and apparently tonight in the shadow cabinet, he all but sat there and simply listened, and that was it.
No, he started out by setting out his position. And then we went round the table and people said what they thought. There's more that unites us than divides us. We all agree the most important thing is to keep the British people safe. But the question is what David Cameron's suggesting, more bombing, going to actually keep people safe? That's what people have to decide.
But the reality is that you've never been more divided than you are over whether to bomb Syria or not. There are marked divisions in the Commons. There are some very loud and indeed large numbers of Labour voices that want to bomb.
There are some loud Labour voices, but they don't reflect what party members think. And I think we've got a weekend to think about.
You're not dealing with party members anymore. You're now dealing with MPs. And MPs in your party want to bomb.
Yes, but I believe that they need to examine what Cameron is talking about and also whether it actually fits with the Labour policy we passed at conference. Why should half a dozen British bombers, whatever it is, joining in the bombing efforts in Syria in a slightly debatable, it's debatable whether the UN resolution makes that legal. Why should that alter anything when the Americans have been bombing for a year?
But if you're saying that you've got 4 people only in the shadow cabinet who are with Mr Corbyn without question, for the rest, they're all for bombing.
Well, I just think, this is like the third time in my political career I've been here, where Parliament is buoyed up on this beating drums of war, something must be done. I think after a weekend's reflection, people may see things differently.
But I'm trying to think, in my time as a journalist, I can't remember a leader in a situation where a vast majority of his own party is of one view and the leader is of another view. He can't survive long.
You're talking about the parliamentary party now. You're talking about the party as a whole.
I am, but that's where the vote will be taken. Not out in the country, but in the Commons.
Well, we had a very lively discussion in the shadow cabinet, and I would say this, that the shadow cabinet doesn't appoint the leader appoints the shadow cabinet. And I'm sure people will go home, they'll talk to their friends, they'll talk to their constituents, and we'll make the final decision on Monday. I'm confident it'll be the right decision.
Heaven preserve us, must have been talking about this ever since the defeat in the Iraq war. I mean, surely they don't want to be still rummaging around as to whether to bomb or not. That must be something they know from the very beginning.
You would think that people would know that bombing in these Middle Eastern situations doesn't resolve anything. But let's hope over the weekend they look at the facts.
This is surely what calls for leadership. Now we want to hear Mr Corbyn coming out and saying what he believes, getting into the Commons, standing up to Mr Cameron, but it isn't happening.
He's put out the statement.
But that's not standing up in the Commons and saying, here, this is what I believe, follow me.
I think you will find he will do this. You cannot, in my opinion, vote to put other women's children in harm's way as soldiers, airmen, airwomen. You cannot vote to put British troops in harm's way without hearing a clear position from the leader of the Labour Party.
What disciplinary actions can he pursue if the shadow cabinet do not follow his leadership?
It's not a question of discipline, but it is a question of he is the one with the electoral mandate. He appoints the shadow cabinet, not the other way around.
But that's a perfectly fair point. But what happens, therefore, if the people who didn't win that mandate, those MPs, those members of the shadow cabinet, do not follow his leadership? What will their consequence be? Will they be sacked from the shadow cabinet?
I can't speak on that, but I know what view party members will take if MPs ignore the views of people at the grassroots and try and take this issue to the brink.
Diane Abbott, thank you very much indeed for coming in.